Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. Today I'm doing more or less like a pickups video. Just talking about some stuff I've acquired recently. Most of it I have not had a chance to really look at yet, but the first thing I'm going to talk about I have had a chance to look at, so I'll be a little more in depth on that. But yeah, just lots of stuff to always be looking for. Some of it's older titles that I had been meaning to pick up or I didn't know about. But let's start with the one I did know about and was excited about, and that's Scarlet Street. This is from Kino Lorber. It's their new 4K. This is Fritz Lang's film from 1945. And it is a fascinating film noir, kind of one of the classics of film noir in my mind, and features Edward G. Robinson, Joan Bennett, and Dan Duryea as the main three in the cast, really. And I'll start with just how it looks. It's a really nice, let's see here, brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 16-bit 4K scan of the 35mm nitrate composite fine grain, courtesy of Universal Pictures and UCLA. It looks nice. I will say there's maybe a little bit of film damage still present, a few scratches, especially on the credits, but I noticed that a little bit throughout. But ultimately, really a nice-looking black and white transfer of this film. And this is one that I think is one of those that did fall into sort of a public domain-y kind of space where you'd get some kind of crappy DVDs of it, for a long time. I could be misremembering that, but I'm pretty sure that was one of those films. But anyway, it's a really great noir story about a cashier. I think he works for a clothing company. A lot of people say it's a bank, but I think it's a clothing company. But he's the cashier, and he works in a little glass box. That's Edward G. Robinson. His name is Christopher Cross. No, not that one. He has a fondness for painting. He has a wife who they don't really care for each other. It's not a great marriage, kind of loveless. And at the beginning of the movie, we see that he's being celebrated for, I don't know, like many years of service. It could be like 20 years of service or a long time. And he gets a nice gold watch from his boss. And on the way out of the party, the boss leaves early and he gets into a car with a young woman. He's an older man. And everybody, the staff inside is like, ooh, kind of. And they clearly can tell he's stepping out on his wife. And, Edward G. Robinson is like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to be loved by a younger woman like that? And by happenstance, he leaves the party a little drunk, is walking home. This is in New York. I mean, obviously it's on sets, but it's set in New York. And he sees an altercation. Basically, he sees Dan Duryea kicking Joan Bennett. He's like beating her up. And he runs over to stop it. And he calls a cop, and she talks him out of, dealing with the cops. He's like, she's just talking about how much of a pain it is. You'll have to get her picture in the paper. It'll be a big thing. Just let's not deal with it. There's reasons for that, and we come to find out later that she's actually sweet on Dan Duryea, and he's just a terrible, almost pimp to her. She may be a prostitute. It's not 100% clear, I don't think. But he takes a liking to her, and he starts seeing her secretly. He sends her a letter. Dan Duryea sees it. He's like, oh, you should milk this sucker for some money, basically. And so she starts doing that. She gets him to give her money for an apartment, which she ends up stealing from, the cashier's office. His wife also has like $2,000 in insurance that was paid out from her prior husband, who was a cop who died in this, saving a woman from drowning, although his body was never recovered. And that comes into play later. But yeah, it's a fascinating movie. It doesn't even have a documentary style. It's a fascinating movie. And I really like it from the noir point of view. And Fritz Lang made another movie with Joan Bennett and Duryea and Edward G. Robinson in 1944 called Woman in the Window, which is different, but also a noir. I prefer this one. So there's stuff that starts happening with his paintings, and I won't go into the full plot of it, but it does turn towards the end. It has a few twists and some darkness, and definitely a dark ending. Great performance from Joan Bennett. She's wonderful. I'm a huge fan. And I love Duryea, and he's a great cad. Apparently a really nice guy, a great father, to his kids, and ultimately didn't want to show his kids some of his movies because he always played kind of jerky characters. But he's really good in this. Like, he's continually manipulating Joan Bennett, and she's continually manipulating Edward G. And he's almost so gullible to the point that you just start to not feel sorry for him. Just like, how stupid can you be, dude? But ultimately, it's a great noir story, and I love where it goes. And this is a really nice release of it. So we also have, let's see here, Margaret Lindsay is Joan Bennett's roommate. There's just some great tension that's maintained throughout. But one of the things I love about this is that it has two commentary tracks on it, and one is from one of my favorite noir commentators of all time, and that's Imogen Sarah Smith. So she does a commentary, and she's obviously fantastic. She always gives such great information. Some of the stuff that I may have mentioned is part of that, but one thing she says is that this was one of Lang's favorite films that he ever made, and that it's one of the few that he felt like it came out exactly how he wanted it. And he later said that the film introduced this theme that started to dominate his entire last part of his career, which is the idea that the average citizen is not much better than a criminal and could easily be turned to be a criminal with the right circumstances. So that comes up in some films he made after this one. So that's a great commentary. And then we also have an audio commentary from David Kalat, author of The Strange Case of Dr. Mbusa. So a really nice 4K release of a great noir classic, Scarlet Street. Big recommend for that one. Now, the rest of these I haven't had a chance to check out, but I will just go through them briefly. First is High Tension. This is the 4K UHD release from Second Sight. Great company. I know I've talked about them here before. I've never had a release of theirs that I bought that I wasn't, totally down with. This is the limited edition, so it comes with a really nice book and some not lobby cards, but like art cards. But the book is actually a bound book, this is why you get the limited edition. I mean, you can get the standard too, and that's totally fine. But I tend to go for the limiteds because of these nice books and the hard box. So this, you get a Region B Blu-ray and the 4K. And this movie, of course, is sort of the breakout film for Alexandre Aja, who, did recently things like Crawl. But this is his slasher, if you will. A weekend away visiting parents becomes a living nightmare for Alex and her best friend Marie when a deranged killer breaks in, slaughters family members, and kidnaps Alex. Hiding to evade Marie, capture Marie sets off on a white-knuckle pursuit to save her friend. Very interesting, maybe controversial twist at the end, and I still am not sure it fully works for me, but I really do like the film regardless, and excited to check out this 4K. Second Sight always does a really good job. They just announced a pre-order for a 4K of Green Room, which I think I'm going to have to get. So anyway, this one, really excited to dig into. Then we have the 4K of Barbarella from Arrow. And this one, came out end of last year. I'm sure a lot of people you've heard a lot of people talk about this one. This is one that I almost didn't get at first and then noticed it's dropped out of print, or it seems to have. So this one went out of print quicker than I expected. I've heard that it's great. I saw it on a lot of best of 4K lists, and 4K and Blu-ray. It's Arrow. It's going to be great. Tons of features here, plus a nice book as well. I'm not going to bust this open right now, but I will when I watch it. But regardless, it's a cult favorite. Jane Fonda, looking very sexy in her sex kitten years. But all-star cast including David Hemmings, Marcel Marceau, glorious retro-futuristic costumes, art design dripping with 60s psychedelia. I just have heard this is great. So this is another one that I just had to snag, and I just haven't been in quite the right frame of mind to watch Barbarella again. It's been a little bit since I've seen it, but yeah, this one, it's out of print, but I noticed I got it on eBay. I think you can get it for around $50, $52, which is a little bit above, what it would have cost if you ordered it at the time. So it's not quite in that crazy out of print costing range, but it's going to get there soon, I think. So if you want that limited with the book and everything, you might want to think about doing it soon. Anyway, so next up we have a Shout exclusive from their website, Unlawful Entry. This film directed by the great Jonathan Kaplan, who did Over the Edge and a bunch of stuff that I like, but Over the Edge is one of my favorites. And this is a very creepy thriller that... now, this is a Scream Factory release, technically, I guess, but this is a website exclusive, so it was a little pricey. I saw some complaints online about this one being a website exclusive, meaning like they should have probably released it as a general sort of thing, a broad release and not just a website exclusive, because I saw that after those complaints, they upped it from like 1,500 copies to like either 2,500 or 2,500 more, in which case it's almost like they could have released it, to the public through all retailers. It's a good movie. It's a bummer that it's so expensive and it's on their site. But after an armed robbery attempt on their suburban home, Michael, Kurt Russell, and Karen Madeline Stowe do what anyone would do. They call the police. That is when they meet Los Angeles policeman Pete Davis, Ray Liotta, and immediately warm up to his caring and sensitive attitude, making the couple's safety his personal concern. Pete begins frequent patrols of their property, but his friendship descends into a twisted obsession as he begins to force his way into the couple's private lives, plunged into a nightmare where protector becomes predator. Michael and Karen must somehow escape the web of security that has become their ultimate enemy. So, very bad news if a cop goes dark on you like this. But Liotta is really good at this kind of role. Like, he just nails that friendly guy, but can turn real sharp and be not friendly anymore, and dangerous. But this is a nice Blu-ray release. It's got unrestrained realism inside the films of Jonathan Kaplan, retrospective interview with Kaplan, Too Tightly Wound inside the filming of Unlawful Entry, interview with cinematographer Jamie Anderson, new symphonic intruder inside the thriller scores of James Horner, retrospective interview with film music historian Daniel Schweiger, audio commentary with Jonathan Kaplan, vintage making up, featurette, trailer, TV spot. So, I mean, it's a full-on special edition, and it's this is from 92. But, a real prime time for thrillers in that period. They were making a lot of great thrillers, and this one's, I think, going a little overlooked these days. So really nice to see it get a physical release. Then we have Marooned. My good friend Mr. Elric Kane just spoke about this recently on an episode of Pure Cinema we did for the beginning of the year. We were doing 5 films because, which is just anything we want to talk about, 5 movies. And this was one of his picks. And I can't remember if I talked about this on the show before, but I'm definitely a fan. And I had not picked up this Imprint Blu-ray yet. And it's the only Blu-ray I know of. But I had to get it. This is a really great... A joint American-Soviet mission is mounted to rescue 3 astronauts stranded in orbit around the Earth. As the oxygen supply diminishes, the men must face the inevitability of death. So, kind of a dark movie with a great cast, though. The astronauts are Richard Crenna, let's see here. Wait a minute. James Franciscus and Gene Hackman. And then the cast also has Gregory Peck, David Jansen, Ted Doherty, Lee Grant, Marriott Hartley, the wives of the astronauts. But yeah, it's a really good, astronaut thriller. Apparently a big influence on Gravity. And this one has an audio commentary by entertainment journalist and author Brian Reisman. And Kim Newman does a featurette on it, which is great. I'm great to have him. The Troubled Master Inside the Final Films of John Sturges featurette. This is a John Sturges film. I'm a big fan of his work. But this one definitely under the radar for a lot of people. And a great tension, great cast. Really solid movie. And Elric just reminded me, I got to get that, Blu-ray. So picked up Marooned. This one from 1969. But yeah, definitely worth your time. Can be found streaming if you want, but had to pick up the imprint. Next up we have, this is Carnal Knowledge. And it's not really available. I mean, this one is a German import that I found. I was just messing around looking up the DVD. There's an old MGM DVD of it. This is Mike Nichols' film from 1971, one of the ones he did in the wake of The Graduate. It's a dark movie, which is another reason I hadn't really been looking for it for a long time. But suddenly it came up somewhere. I can't remember. I heard it on a podcast or something. And I was like, I kind of want to watch it again. And I'm like, I don't have the DVD. I remember the DVD was maybe not even 16:9 enhanced, like it would have played. If it played Letterboxd, it would have been in a 4:3 box on your widescreen TV, if I'm recalling correctly. But it could have been 16:9. I can't remember. But it wasn't a great DVD regardless. But there was no Blu-ray. And so I had changed my settings on Blu-ray.com to World as opposed to US. And so that's how I actually ended up finding the Sleuth Blu-ray, was just putting in the World and typing that in. So I do recommend, if you're really looking for something that's hard to find, just select World as the area on Blu-ray.com and see what comes up. And so I was like, oh, here's a German Blu-ray. I haven't had a chance to check out the transfer yet, but it's a Studio Canal transfer, so I have some confidence it'll be not too bad. I don't know what the extras are, but and this is Region B locked, by the way. And of course, this movie is about the concurrent sexual lives of best friends Jonathan and Sandy, and they are played by Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel. Those lives which are affected by the sexual mores of the time and their own temperament, especially in relation to the respective women who end up in their lives. And a couple of those women are Candice Bergen and Anne Margaret, but you also see Rita Moreno, Cynthia O'Neill, Carol Kane. It's a good cast, but like I said, a dark movie about, men and like Nicholson sort of trying to school Garfunkel on, being with women, having sex with women, how to treat women. He's not a particularly likable character, to say the least. And I won't go into where it goes. If you haven't seen the movie, like it carries on. It starts with them, I think, in college, and they're both sort of trying to date Candice Bergen, and that is some dark stuff. And then it gets darker as it gets older, as the movie progresses. We see them after that time. But definitely a really interesting Mike Nichols movie that I feel like isn't really talked about anymore because it's hard to see it. I'm not sure if it's on YouTube, but I don't think it may be streaming. You may be able to rent it, but I don't think you can buy it on digital. So anyway, I just was like, oh, I'll check out a German Blu-ray of Carnal Knowledge at some point. So I picked that up. Then of course we got here, next up we have Forgotten Silver. This I think is this German or French? This is an import. What is this? I think this might be German as well, actually. I think I just got this on Amazon though. For those who don't know, this is this fake documentary that Peter Jackson did back in 1995. But it was neat because he didn't push the fake part of it. It's the life story of Colin Mackenzie, a forgotten pioneer of international cinema who was born in rural New Zealand in 1888. It's only about an hour long, but it is fascinating because Jackson's in it, and there's a reverence for this guy. It is fascinating, and they've gone so far as to sort of recreate or create old film footage to run to show this guy. I mean, there's a lot involved in this, and so it's a really neat documentary. I'd only realized recently there was a Blu-ray. It looks like it has a making of on here, and maybe something else. This is Region B locked, but yeah, you know, it's a fascinating one. Another one that I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about in terms of it's not that available, and it's a weird one because it's like an hour long or whatever. And I don't know. At the time when it came out on DVD, I remember I was working at a video store and we were just like, is this real? What is happening? And then there's some things in it that you kind of go, oh, yeah, no, I think this is a joke. But it's an elaborate joke, and it's really interestingly done by Peter Jackson. Just kind of came out of nowhere too. Like, you know, it was one of those things where he was in that world of the Lord of the Rings stuff, and so anything he did, you would hear about it. And this thing just sort of was like, where'd this come from? And that was part of the reason I think it could get away with the idea of like, is this real? I don't know if this is real. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it. A lot of fun, very enjoyable doc, if you will. That's Forgotten Silver. And then lastly, The Man Who Watched Trains, aka Paris Express. This is from 1952. This one I had the extreme pleasure of seeing an IB Tech print of with Mr. Quentin Tarantino. He is doing a month-long IB Tech festival at the Vista Theater, which is the other theater in Los Angeles that he owns, next to the New Beverly. Not next to it, but it's in Hollywood. And so Elric and I did a calendar episode of Pure Cinema for this month, and this was for us one of the great discoveries of this calendar. This movie, really fascinating. Actually, kind of ties into Scarlet Street now that I think about it. When we were talking about it with Quentin, it was this idea of like, oh, it's kind of like one of those Edward G. Robinson movies where he's a nebbish, nothing kind of person who gets caught up in something a little bigger than him. And that's kind of what happens here. Mild-mannered bookkeeper Keys Poppinger lives a mundane life and dreams about the places he can go on the trains that travel from through his hometown in Groningen, Holland. But when a French police detective shows up at his firm to inspect the books, Poppinger's unremarkable existence is instantly altered, and he soon finds himself on the way to Paris with a suitcase of cash on the run from the law. Based on a 1938 novel by George Simenon, the author who created the fictional sleuth Jules Maigret, and whose books The Man on the Eiffel Tower and The Brothers Rico were adapted in the big screen. Man Who Watched Trains Go By casts beloved Warner Brothers character actor Claude Rains as the meek Poppinger. The supporting cast includes Herbert Lom. That's his boss at this. He works at it's like a shipping company or something like that, like a long historied shipping company. Marta Toren, she's the woman on the front. She's sort of like the Joan Bennett character, I guess, in Scarlet Street, where she's trying to get the money from him when she finds out he has it. Anouk Ami is in this, and Marius Goring, who I remember from The Red Shoes. He plays the detective who's trying to figure out. Basically, he comes to Herbert Lom and says, like, we're seeing he's from Paris. He's like, we're seeing some Dutch money coming into Paris, and we're thinking we can trace it back to your company. And of course, Herbert Lom's like, I have no idea what that's about, and I won't go into the specifics of what happens, but there is money, and it does end up in Claude Rains' hands, and it's a really great role for Claude Rains. And it's neat to see him in color. We talked about this on the episode, but he is a guy I'm used to seeing in black and white. And so this is a beautiful color film, and so it's nice that Classic Flicks put this out on Blu-ray. It's not necessarily like a restoration or anything, but I'm hoping it'll look pretty good, yeah, and no extras on this one, sadly. Region A locked, but still one, once I saw it, I was like, I have to own that movie. It's too good not to own it. So that's the last of the recent pickups. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.